From the 2016 Trotsdale Library's Halloween Writing Contest. Drive in the Country by Charlie Sapuer. There are strange and unusual things that happen out here in the West. Case in point. When I was a mite bit younger, I was a lot more reckless than I am now, and I had an adventurous spirit. I would often vanish into the wilderness with little warning for days at a time. In those days, I had an old Jeep. It was sky blue with white trim. It was perfect for exploring. Best of all, I took the roof and doors off and had access to the open air. Part of my daily routine at the time was a round trip from the countryside village to the big city, which wasn't much more than a glorified town. But that town had a college and a military base, so the population was fairly big city folk. I was one of the college students, and I had a part-time job on the side to help with the cost of college, which was entirely doable back in those days. The trip was a long one. Each way was close to an hour, no matter which of the 3 paved roads was chosen. In bad weather, it was a pack-your-lunch and dinner trip. However, there were some shortcuts to get away from the traffic, but not really get away from the time. One such shortcut led across the local Native American reservation. The reservation was the barren lands between the city and the village I lived in. On the main roads it was busy and had few gas stations and houses along the way. But off the main roads it was wilderness. Once my tires left the pavement, it was just twisty, dark roads and quiet. Well, except for the very far southern end, where the dirt roads converged on the reservation proper. They were a friendly bunch, too. If I was out there, I'd get waved at or other such pleasantries along the way. That's one of the reasons why I would go through there. But at night, it was desolate. The only thing you could see were the stars above and whatever part of the road or trees or bushes happened to be in your headlights. I preferred that scenery to the black pavement, and often would take that extra journey just to get away from it. But the desolation wasn't just lack of lighting. It was a total lack of light. None of the local homes which could be seen in the daytime, mostly far from the twisty roads, could be seen at night. There were no people or even local pickups or tractors out after dark. In fact, on the occasion that I had the chance to pass through when the sun was setting, everyone seemed to melt into the background before it was too dark to see. Even house lights would go away as if swallowed by the darkness itself. I heard a rumor in the area that there was something out after dark the locals called Yee-Naglushi, and they were deathly afraid of it, and would hide away in their homes. Now, at the job I had back then, I would end up driving through the area well after sundown, and sometimes on closer towards midnight. It was one of those extra late drives where I found myself faced with something truly strange. Everything seemed fairly normal. I was driving along the dusty track. I had added lights to the Jeep, which were extra bright, made just for being out alone in dark places, though 2 of them had a sort of brown-yellow tint. It was still better than not seeing, but not by much. I had rounded a corner which was a tractor-carved channel surrounded by high dirt berms to the sides. It was nearly impossible to see round the curve. All you could see was the berm ahead as you made the turn. Well, right as I got around the turn, there was a big pile of movement in the center of the road. I could swear it was a pile of dogs fighting, but they were larger than any dogs I had ever seen, and they looked kind of overly long-legged. From that half-second glance, it almost looked like 3 or 4 of the dogs were holding down one in the center of the road. I hit the brakes as several of them jumped aside, but one was still in the road. I heard the thump as the underside of the Jeep hit the critter. It was solid, and not just once. It was several thumps. That critter was big enough that it must have tumbled and hit on the frame and transmission down there. The brake pedal suddenly went straight to the floor. Good thing brakes are meant to work somewhat still even in that sort of event, and I was able to slow to a stop. But it was too late. But it wasn't that what made my heart suddenly tighten up like a clamp was on it. It was the screaming. It was the most horrifying screaming I'd ever heard. I don't even have words to explain what it sounded like. It wasn't no dog, that was for sure. Didn't carry a gun at the time, but I did have a big hunting knife under the seat. It was a large Bowie-style knife, and I had hand-sharpened it enough that drawing it from the sheath made me nervous about cutting myself. I was also young and thought that I could handle anything with that knife. The screaming continued as the critter scrambled into the darkness. I could hear it crashing through the underbrush headed towards the river. By the red glow of the tail lights, I could just make out a trail of blood from behind the Jeep and over the berm on the left. There was nothing I could do, really. I wasn't going to chase that thing out into the night in hopes of putting it out of its misery with only a knife. When I turned around, I felt a chill run through me and I froze in place. On the berm, still ahead, lit in the dull brown glow of the lights, was something crouching and looking my way. It looked like a dog in that it had splotchy gray and white fur and pointed ears and was down on all fours. But the legs were weirdly long, and the eyes were like black dots within white circles. Worst of all, it was just silently staring at me. Had it been there the entire time? I thought back as I lifted the knife slowly to point the sharp end at the critter. Maybe. In my head, I thought I remembered it was there, watching as I rounded the corner when I was trying to avoid the others. He crouched back a little as if the bladed edge of the knife was reaching all the way over to it. It still just stared right at me. Or perhaps it was staring at the bright lights and couldn't see me past them, even though I was a step back and to the side of the Jeep. Then I remembered there were maybe 4 more of them things which had scrambled out of the way when I drove up. Sure enough, there was a shuffling of dirt off to my left, behind the berm. I couldn't see anything in the dim red glow of the tail lights if I wanted to. I didn't even try to look away from that one staring at me, but I knew it wasn't gonna stick around there another moment. I stepped over and slid behind the wheel and found the gear shift. The critter on the berm faded back like the darkness sort of washed over it and pulled it away. I could have sworn I heard a voice. It didn't sound like a voice. It sounded deeper, sort of like a windy burst through rustling leaves, through whatever the words were. I couldn't understand them. They sounded like something in the local language. I dumped the clutch and tore out of there as fast as I could. Later, after I reached the main road and found a gas station with enough lights to see, I took a look at the Jeep. There were a few clumps of bloody dark hair on the bumper and front axle. Strange enough, the brakes had a tear in the steel line right down by the fender well, as if someone had hacked at it with an axe from below. There were also a peculiar set of scratches along the skid plate in the center. They looked like 5 claws had grabbed onto it and dragged it down the center. I never cut through the reservation again.